Now, we don't often get callers from Israel, but we have one tonight, and so it would be impolite not to take Ken in Israel. Go ahead, Ken.
Hi, George. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thanks for phoning.
Sure. I'm curious why last night and also tonight you didn't feel it worthy to discuss the terrorist attack that took place in Jerusalem on Thursday night.
I think the answer, Ken, is that we spent 3 entire hours last Saturday night talking about the crisis in Israel-Palestine, and in particular the Israeli terrorist attacks that killed 120 people, 35 of them children, in the preceding 3 or 4 days. I think that's probably why, Ken.
Do you see no distinction between purposely murdering children and children tragically dying because they're human shields?
I certainly don't, because the children are dead, and that's the point, Ken. And I know you like to think that children killed by your country, Israel, are just collateral damage, whilst your own children who are targeted and killed are 2 different things, but I don't see it that way. My point, Ken, is this, that the targeting of and the killing and harming of unarmed, non-combatants, civilian people, whether they're in a yeshiva in Jerusalem or whether they're in a camp in Gaza, are victims of terrorism. The one is state terrorism, the other is individual terrorism, and I'm against both, but I somehow think you're not.
I think every child who dies is a tragedy, but it amazes me that you see no moral distinction between purposely murdering children and on the other side, accidentally.
No, see, I did. That's if you'll forgive me for saying so, Ken, a very duplicitous and weasel-worded formulation. You see, the children who were killed in Gaza were not killed accidentally, unless you call a man drinking 15 pints of lager and getting behind a car wheel and driving at 100 miles an hour and ploughing into a crowd of school children on a zebra crossing, unless you call that an accident. I don't, you see. And if you drop high-velocity weapons into towns, into refugee camps, and a large number of children are killed, you're guilty of terrorism. That's my point of view, but I don't think it's yours.
Well, I think that if England was being bombed with rockets, I would hope that the English Air Force...
Well, you see, Ken, England was being bombed. Throughout the Irish Republican campaign, even 10 Downing Street had a rocket fired through its window, and the British cabinet had to take cover underneath the cabinet table. England was bombed when Mrs. Thatcher came within an inch of losing her life, when the Grand Hotel in Brighton was bombed by the Irish Republican movement. Now, the one thing the English Air Force did not do was to take off and drop high-velocity weapons on West Belfast. And if we had done, we certainly would not then have claimed that any children killed by the bombs were a tragic accident.
Did West Belfast send 1,500 rockets in a period of a month on London?
Well, how many people were killed by the rockets that you're talking about, Ken?
That's not important. That's not.
No, I know. You think it's not important, but I do, and I think my listeners do. And just in case you don't know the number, let me give it to you. The number is 1. And in fact, 16 Israelis have been killed by these rockets since the so-called Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. But 6,700 Palestinians have been killed in revenge. Now, I know that you may well be a follower of the New Testament, and you may well be a follower of the idea that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is the way forward. But of course, that's thousands of eyes for an eye. That's thousands of teeth for a tooth. And as Mr. Gandhi said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will eventually leave the whole world blind.
When England was bombed, and when its civilians were bombed in World War II, England responded by bombing German cities.
Please don't compare this tawdry little settler war against the people whose land you've settled upon to the Second World War. The Second World War was total war throughout the world. It was total war throughout the world to stop the vile, evil doctrine of Hitler fascism, of Nazism, from dealing out to the whole world that which they dealt out to the Jews and to the gypsies and to the communists and to the disabled people, to the mentally handicapped people, to the trade unionists and all the other millions that they exterminated. And I would have thought this was thin ice for you, Ken, frankly, especially as we discussed it last week on the back of the Deputy Defence Minister of Israel promising a Holocaust to the Palestinians in Gaza, a promise he tried his best to deliver on, Ken.
That was that is a distortion of what he said.
Oh, no. Don't give me that one. We saw his lips move. We've got him on videotape. He promised them a Shoah. He promised them an S-H-O-A-H, Shoah. You know very well what Shoah means, Ken, so please don't phone us all the way from Israel to try and throw sand in our eyes. I can't say it's been a pleasure to talk to you, but I'm sure you'll have set the telephones ringing. 08717 2233 44 is the number to call, the mother of all talk shows, but we've